Polls in France say the far-right National Rally Party is set to emerge as the largest group in parliamentary elections this weekend. Now, the party is predicted to gain around 35% of the vote, beating a left-wing alliance and the party of President Emmanuel Macron. The prospect of victory for the National Rally with its nationalist and anti-immigrant policies has France's allies more than worried. Here's German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius.
I can say for my part and for the view of Germany that nationalism has never been the solution to problems, but in fact a substantial part of the problems. This is a lesson from European history that cannot be neglected. That's why I would be happy if a true result were achieved, which would strengthen the democratic, free and pro-European forces and thus the future of Europe.
Gesine is with the German Marshall Fund of the United States, where she focuses on European security and defense issues. Gesine, welcome to DW. Now, we just heard the German defense minister giving a pretty clear election recommendation. That's a fairly unusual move, isn't it? What exactly are France's allies worried about with a predicted win for Le Pen's party?
So first of all, thank you for having me. And indeed, the thing is that if there was a far-right prime minister or a far-right government in France, this would certainly be an earthquake politically in Europe, to the extent that many fundamentals of French foreign policy would potentially be questions, such as really the willingness to move the European project forward. And also it would significantly complicate working with the French government on all issues related to European affairs and foreign policy. So even though the French president has a very high competence in foreign policy, defense, for example, according to the constitution, falls to the prime minister. So that particularly cooperation among ministries could be significantly more complicated than it is today.
Let's look at defense, because France has been one of Ukraine's most outspoken and staunch backers. What would a national rally win mean for European support for Ukraine?
So this is still very difficult to say today, because the project, of course, remains pretty vague. And we also see that the National Rally has been a bit more cautious on the question of Ukraine. So around a week ago or so, Jordan Bardella, who is the lead candidate and might potentially become prime minister in case of a victory, explicitly said that that basically the war in Ukraine is a security threat for Europe. And they are now also more cautious in general on their rhetoric on Russia, which previously was very Russian-friendly. So we do not know how exactly foreign policy under the National Rally would look like. But it is certain that there is a big question mark on that. And I think it is this uncertainty that makes it very complicated also for other Europeans to anticipate what is basically coming.
Yeah, and very concerning for France's allies, I'm guessing. Now, no matter the outcome of this election that is coming up, Emmanuel Macron will stay on as president. That is just the French electoral system. He has extensive executive powers. In a scenario of what the French call cohabitation, where he'd be forced to work with his political enemies, how much can he really achieve against the will of Parliament and possibly the government?
So first of all, it is important that foreign policy and also defense and security policy have been more and more centralized in the Élysée in recent years under Macron. But it is also very interesting to know that actually particularly defense policy is what in French is called a domaine partagé, so a shared domain of policymaking. The fact that the president had so much grip on that was more a political practice than a constitutional reality or constitutional obligation, so that we can potentially brace for actually negotiations or grip for influence on foreign policy and defense or particularly defense in the next months. We don't know how exactly a potential deal under a cohabitation on that would look like.
Macron is committed to the alliance between France and Germany. It's not the best relationship at the moment, but, you know, it is a strong alliance still. The main far-right candidate, you mentioned him there, Gesine Bardella, he says he will respect the Franco-German alliance, but he wants a stronger voice for France in Europe. So what would change if the National Rally really established itself at the heart of government?
So first of all, I think even though we hear things like maybe a light commitment to the Franco-German alliance or the Franco-German partnership from the French National Rally, I think it's still important to know that the French National Rally really has a tradition in framing Germany as the bad guy in Europe and basically framing action the German government takes as very detrimental for France. So the idea that there might be any kind of French government under Prime Minister Bardella seeking closer cooperation with Germany, I think that is purely an illusion. If there was a National Rally government, it is particularly from Macron that France would need, that France could be pushed into stronger cooperation with Germany. And it is also, on the flip side, Macron who could potentially be the most important interlocutor for Germany, because on many projects, for example, on a ministerial level, such as the battle tank that France and Germany have been working on, or even cooperation in the Weimar Triangle together with Poland, I don't see that there would be a willingness to engage.
And Emmanuel Macron, the president, has warned that the policies of the far right and left could lead to civil war. To what extent is that electioneering? And to what extent should France's allies really be concerned about political instability in the country going forward?
So I would definitely not use the wording of civil war, because I think that is a very, very strong and also polarizing statement. But I think it still underlines that there are tensions in French society and that it is increasingly difficult to basically reconcile the different sides in the debate in France, because basically with the emergence of his party Renaissance and En Marche, which originally aimed to strengthen the political center in France, Macron has de facto absolutely weakened the parties that were previously at the center, leading to strengthening the forces at the political or at the margins, at the fringes of the political system. And it is, I think, safe to say that particularly when we are looking at the polls, we are currently looking at a desperately hung parliament. If the polls indicate a realistic scenario. And I think domestic instability is something that allies definitely can prepare for, but we have to see how this is playing out on a government level and how this is going to affect foreign policy.
Gesine Weber of the German Marshall Fund on Emmanuel Macron's big gamble. Thank you so much for all those insights.